Hey guys, it's Aiko with Schwa Girl. Welcome to my show. I'm an American English pronunciation coach and business coach based in Hawaii. So in this episode, I would like to talk about how you can start thinking in English only. So this channel is designed for people who speak English as a second language and people who have their online business, online coaching business, or who want to start their online coaching business. So in this episode, I'd like to share 3 tips for you to be able to start thinking in English. And this is truly coming from my experience, my own experience. So I was born and raised in Japan, and I had 6 years of English education in Japan. But when I came to the US when I was 23, that's when I realized I didn't speak English at all. And I had a very thick Japanese accent, and people didn't understand my English. And I had a very hard time communicating with native English speakers in the US because of my Japanese accent. And that time, I made up my mind. You know what? I'm gonna master English, even though I am starting at 23, at the age of 23. So I'm an adult English learner. So my English is my second language forever, and I know it, but it's okay because right now, when I'm speaking English now, right? I'm thinking in English only right now. I don't think in Japanese at all when I speak English. So I would like to show you how you can do it. Okay, so I have 3 tips. So the first tip is to imagine. Imagination is the key to learn a new language, especially if you are starting as an adult learner. So imagination is the key. So when you see an English word, for example, apple, it's an easy word, right? Apple. And when you hear an easy English word, what do? Do you translate that word into your language? Like, for example, for me, I speak Japanese as my first language. So when I hear apple, I can go, oh, apple, oh, it's ringo. And then I imagine apples. You know, I used to do this. I used to translate any English words or sentences into Japanese and then understand it. You know, you're doing some extra step. Your brain is working harder. So this is how you can do it. You can imagine the situation or things by listening to just the English words. So for example, if you hear apple or apples, you just imagine the fruit that's red and round, and then when you bite that fruit, it's white inside and it's sweet and juicy. Just imagine so that you'll be able to just understanding the English words into your imagination, and you understand it. So you don't have to translate every single word into your language. You're doing something extra. Your brain is gonna work harder that way. So you want to take this step out. Then you'll be able to do smooth transition from just, listening to English words into just imagination. So that's tip number 1. You can do this. It worked for me. So it was really weird at first because I was used to translating, but that's something that I needed to unlearn. So you can unlearn the habit, and then your brain doesn't have to work hard anymore. So it'll be really, really easy for you. Second point is to understand the English sentences from the beginning, because the language structure is usually different, especially if I don't know if you know Japanese language structure, but Japanese language structure is opposite, almost opposite of how English works. So in English, you always have the subject and the tense and the verb and the object, but in Japanese, it usually starts with the object, verb, and tense, something like that. I don't know where I usually put subject. Maybe I don't really say the subject. See, it's really, really weird, right? It's very, very different. So you want to get used to the English language structure. So it starts with a subject, and then when you hear the subject, you just imagine the subject, and then when you move to the tense, then you just imagine the tense. Oh, did it happen in the past or it's happening in the future? You can tell by listening to the tense. So just listen to it and imagine. Don't translate it into your language. And then move on to the verb and just imagine the action. Move on to the object. So you imagine the object, right? So this is how you can do it. So if I translate English sentences into Japanese, this is what's gonna happen. So if I listen to English sentence and then Japanese works backwards. So after I finish listening to the whole sentence, I start translating from the last word going backwards. It's very, very complicated. It didn't work. And then my brain got really, really confused. So this is why it's very, very important for you to start understanding English sentences from the beginning to the end. So when you finish listening to the whole sentence, you already have the situation already understood in your brain. You already have the complete information, so you don't have to translate every single word in English and try to understand it. Okay, so that was the tip number 2. So tip number 3 is to use English as much as possible. So I'm gonna go to some technical thing here. So when I came to the US, I actually chose a community college that didn't have Japanese students. So, then I didn't speak English. So what I did was, okay, so my English level was not really good, and I didn't really speak English, and I couldn't really communicate in the US. But I put myself into the situation where no one really speaks Japanese. I think there were a few, like 1 or 2 students who came to the college because of the same reason, but I didn't really talk to them because we came here to study English, so I didn't really use Japanese at all. But in that situation, it took me about 3 months to be able to start thinking in English. My English level didn't become much better because it's only 3 months, right? It's just a matter of 3 months. So I didn't really master English in 3 months, but what I was able to do in 3 months was I was able to start thinking in English only. Even though my knowledge of English language was very, very limited, I was still able to think in English. So the reason why is I was using English every day from the moment that I woke up till the moment that I went to sleep. And then in 3 months, I started dreaming in English. So from then, 24 hours a day, every day, and then I spent 3 years in that kind of environment where I didn't speak Japanese at all. My English became so much better, and actually I almost forgot how to speak Japanese. So after 3 years of being in the situation, actually I went back to Japan for like 3 months. When I got to Japan, I couldn't speak Japanese. It was really weird. I was thinking in English in my head and I'm trying to speak Japanese. The words didn't come out right away. So this is, how your brain can adjust to any situation. So, it started when I was 23. And then 23, 4, 5, 6, for 3 years, I was able to do that. So you can do the same. And it took me 3 months for me to start thinking in English, even though my English level was not that great. So you can do it at any level. So to do that, you want to write and think in English all the time. And then also you can talk to yourself in English. And that way, you'll be able to start thinking in English. So I just calculated. So it took me 3 months, right? But from the moment I woke up to the moment that I went to sleep, I was using English all day, every day for 3 months. That came out 1440 hours. So 1,440 hours. So if I don't know how many hours you use English, but if you use 2 hours a day, probably you take a long time to be able to start thinking in English. So what you can do is you want to think of how you can use English all the time, right? So most important part is to start thinking in your English, in your brain. Like, when you're not talking, we're not listening to English, you can still think, right? So when you think in English, just think in English. Don't use your native language. It may be hard at first, but actually you get used to it, because I was able to get used to it in 3 months. And I started dreaming in English only from 3 months. And I became really comfortable using just English only for the rest of my life. And right now, as of now, so I'm speaking English right now, and I'm not thinking in Japanese at all. And when I'm editing or writing, I usually write everything in not Japanese, in English, like just here's my memo right here. And I write everything in English now, because when I write in English, I think in English. I don't think in Japanese. So this is how I this is how I use English all the time, almost all day, every day. So I get used to using English only. So there are 3 tips. So the first tip was imagine, right? And the second tip was to understand English from the beginning. That's really important. The third tip was to use English all the time, almost every day, all the time, every day. And you'll be able to start thinking in English in 3 months at any level. And yeah, so please let me know how it works, because it really works. So please let me know if so if you are able to think in English, how long did it take for you? And how many hours a day did you use English? So please comment below and share your journey. Alright, so thank you very much for watching. And if you have any questions about English learning or pronunciation, please let me know. And if you have any questions about business or marketing for your business, especially online coaching business, please comment below. Even though I'm a new entrepreneur, I still want to share my experience. And I still remember how I started because I just started 2.5 years ago for my online coaching business, which is pronunciation coaching and business coaching. So I would like to share my experience. Okay, so thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in another episode. Bye!